300 Hells Angels filling a hospital parking lot at dawn was not something the town of Marysville, Ohio had ever seen before, especially not for an old man who pushed a mop. But it all started 11 months ago when a janitor named Walter Pruitt began doing something nobody asked him to do. Every morning before the sun came up, he polished a stranger's Harley for free. He never left a note. He never asked for thanks. He just wiped down the chrome, folded his rag, and went back to his floors. For 11 months, no one knew why. And the day they finally found out, 300 men shut down their engines and stood in complete silence in front of a man most of them had never met. The St. Bridget Medical Center sat on the north edge of town, where the streetlights ran out and the cornfields began. At 5 in the morning, the building hummed with the low electric breath of a place that never fully sleeps. The smell of floor wax and burnt coffee hung in the empty corridors. A radio behind the nurse's station played softly, the volume turned down so as not to wake anyone who had finally drifted off. This was the kind of hospital that had been the heart of the county once, back when the mills were open and the town was full. Now half its wings were dark, and the people who kept it running came in before dawn and left after dark, and most of them were never seen by the patients at all. Walter Pruitt was one of those people. He was 73 years old, narrow through the shoulders, with hands that had gone spotted and stiff but still moved with care. He wore a gray uniform shirt pressed flat every morning, the collar buttoned all the way up even though no one would have minded if it weren't. He had worked at St. Bridget for 31 years. He knew which floor tiles squeaked and which doors stuck in the damp. He knew the names of every nurse on the night shift and the names of their children. He still wrote each of them a birthday card in slow, careful cursive, the kind they don't teach anymore, and left it in their locker without signing anything more than a small W. He had buried his wife 4 years back. He had a son somewhere out west who called on holidays. He lived alone in the same house he had bought in 1979, and every morning he rose at 4, made 1 cup of coffee in the same chipped mug, and drove the empty roads to a building that barely remembered it needed him. He kept his late wife's reading glasses folded in his shirt pocket, though his own eyes had long since stopped matching the prescription. He had never learned to leave the house without a pressed collar. It was a small thing. It was the kind of small thing that tells you everything about a man. What no one at the hospital knew was that Walter had a grandson. The boy's name was Danny, and he was the only thing left of Walter's daughter, who had died young. And the boy had grown up half wild and angry at a world that had taken his mother before he was old enough to remember her face. Walter had tried, in his quiet way, to be a steadying hand. They had not always understood each other, but the old man loved that boy the way you love the last lit window on a dark street. But there was one thing Walter did each morning that wasn't in his job description. Out past the loading dock, in the corner of the staff lot where the security light flickered, a single motorcycle was parked every night. A black Harley, low and heavy, with a worn leather seat and a tank that had seen a lot of road. It belonged to a man named Cole Hennessy who rode the night ambulance routes as a medic and parked it there at the end of every shift. And every morning, before Cole came out, Walter walked to that bike with a soft rag and a small can of polish he paid for out of his own pocket. And he cleaned it. The chrome, the tank, the spokes, one at a time. Then he folded the rag, slipped it into his back pocket, and went inside to start the floors. He never told anyone why. When a nurse asked once, he only smiled and said the bike looked like it had somewhere to be. That was all. Before we get to the morning the Brotherhood arrived, do me a favor and hit subscribe. Then drop your hometown in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. I read every single one. Now, back to Walter, because what was already in motion that autumn would change everything for a man who only thought he was cleaning a stranger's bike. The man who owned the Harley was Cole Hennessy, and Cole was not a small thing in that town. He was 44, built like a door, with a gray-streaked beard and a back patch that read Hell's Angels across the top rocker. He had ridden for the Marysville chapter for 20 years, and before that, he had ridden alone. People moved when Cole came through a room, not out of disrespect, out of instinct. But the thing most people didn't know about Cole was that under the leather and the patches, he had spent the last 6 years working as an emergency medic, riding into the worst nights this county had, pulling people out of wrecked cars and pulling families back from the edge. He had a daughter he was raising by himself, and he had no idea, none at all, that an old man was cleaning his motorcycle every morning before the sun came up. Walter had been doing it since the previous winter. He had a reason. He carried it the way some men carry a stone in a coat pocket, quietly, all day, every day. He had never told Cole. He had never told anyone, and he had decided, somewhere in his careful old heart, that he never would. That should have been the end of it. A small kindness, unexplained, repeated until it disappeared into routine. But on a cold morning in late October, two men in a charcoal sedan pulled into the staff lot at 5:45, and everything Walter had kept quiet began to come apart. The first one out of the car wore a suit. It was the wrong suit for that parking lot, the wrong suit for that hour, a tailored gray thing that didn't belong anywhere near a mop bucket. His name was Del Marsh, and he was a regional administrator brought in by the company that had bought the hospital's parent group a year before. The second man carried a clipboard and stayed half a step behind him the entire time. Marsh walked the lot the way a man walks a property he intends to sell. He didn't look at people. He looked at square footage. He found Walter by the Harley, rag in hand, bent over the front wheel. "You," Marsh said. "What are you doing to that vehicle?" Walter straightened slowly. "Cleaning it, sir." "Is that hospital property?" "No, sir. It belongs to one of the medics." Then, at the clipboard man, and something in his face settled into a decision he had clearly already made before he ever got out of the car. "We've been reviewing staffing efficiency. Custodial is carrying redundancy." He said the word redundancy the way some men say a name they've practiced. "You're spending paid hours on personal favors in the lot. That's theft of time, technically." Walter said nothing. "How old are you?" Marsh asked. 73. Marsh nodded, as if the number confirmed a column in a file. "We're consolidating. Your position is being eliminated. Effective end of the week. HR will have papers. There's no pension trigger at your tenure bracket under the new ownership, so I wouldn't count on anything there." He glanced at the bike one more time and stopped touching the medics' vehicles. "It's a liability." 4 nurses had come out the side door for the shift change. 4 of them saw it happen. 4 of them looked down at the clipboard, at the asphalt, at anything but the old man standing very still beside the motorcycle. Nobody said a word. The cold made their breath show. Walter folded his rag once, then again, and slid it into his back pocket the way he did every morning, and Marsh was already walking back toward the building, talking about square footage. That was the first cut, and Marsh was a man who never made just one. He came back the next morning, and the morning after. He found the smallest things and made them large. He told Walter the cursive birthday cards in the lockers were a privacy violation and had to stop. He stood in the corridor and timed how long it took the old man to clean a hallway, then wrote the number on his clipboard and let Walter see him write it. He moved Walter's start time earlier and his break later, and when Walter said nothing, he seemed to take the silence as permission to press harder. Intimate cruelty doesn't shout. It uses what it knows. And Del Marsh had figured out very quickly that the old man would not fight back and that no one in that building would fight for him. The night nurses saw all of it. They saw him follow the old man down the corridor with the clipboard. They saw him stand over Walter while the old man knelt to scrub a scuff out of the tile, asking him questions he didn't wait for answers to. One of them, a young nurse named Priya, came close once and started to say something, and Marsh turned and asked her whether she had somewhere to be, and she did, and she hated herself for the rest of the shift. That was how it worked. He never had to raise his voice. He just made the cost of speaking up feel a little higher than each person could pay in the moment, and the moments added up to silence. On the third morning, Marsh found Walter at the Harley again. The old man hadn't stopped. He had simply moved it earlier, before any clock he could be measured against had started. "I told you to stop touching that bike," Marsh said. "I did it on my own time, sir," Walter said quietly. "Before my shift. You don't have time that's your own here. You're on my schedule until Friday, and then you're on nobody's." Marsh stepped closer, and his voice dropped so the words carried to Walter and no one else. "Whatever this is, this little ritual, it ends. You're not special. You're a line item. I'm closing. Do you understand me?" Walter looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at the bike. And what he said next, the clipboard man would repeat to the nurses, and the nurses would repeat to a medic, and the medic would carry it all the way to 300 men. "He saved my grandson. Walter said. The boy was 16, wrapped his car around the bridge rail on Route 9 last winter, 2 in the morning, in the snow. The medic who pulled him out and breathed for him on the side of the road until the helicopter came. That's whose bike this is. He never knew the boy was mine. I never told him. I just wanted to do one thing for the man every day that I'm still able to. That's all this is. The lot went so quiet that the only sound was the flicker of the security light. Marsh stood there. For just a second, something passed behind his eyes. And then it was gone, because men like Marsh have trained themselves not to feel the floor move. That's very moving, he said. Friday. And he walked inside. But Cole Hennessy had pulled into the lot 2 minutes earlier, on foot, coming back from a coffee run, and he had stopped at the corner of the building, and he had heard all of it. Cole did not say anything to Marsh. He didn't rush. He never rushed. He stood at the edge of the lot for a moment with his coffee going cold in his hand, looking at the old man and the bike and the rag in the old man's back pocket. Then he set the cup down on the curb. He walked across the lot, slow and even, and the nurses by the door went still, and the clipboard man took a step back without knowing why. Cole stopped in front of Walter. The old man looked up at him, and his face did a thing that breaks you to watch, because he thought he was about to be told to stop too. You're Danny's grandfather, Cole said, not a question. Walter's chin trembled. Yes, he made it. I checked. He's at Ohio State now. Cole's voice was very low. You've been cleaning my bike for 11 months, and you never said one word. I didn't want anything, Walter whispered. I just wanted to say thank you in a way that didn't ask you for anything back. For a moment, no one spoke. And then Cole Hennessy, who people moved away from in rooms, reached out and put one hand on the old man's shoulder, and his jaw was working hard against something. Who's the suit? He asked. He's letting me go Friday, Walter said. It's all right. It's just how it is now. Cole turned his head and looked at the glass door Marsh had walked through. He did not raise his voice. He did not make a threat. He just looked at that door for a long, quiet moment, and then he took out his phone, and he made one call, and all he said into it was 6 words. Walter at St. Bridget needs us. Then he put the phone away, and he sat down on the curb next to the old man, and he waited. Marsh came back out 40 minutes later because someone had told him there was a problem in the lot. He had his clipboard. He had his confidence, the suit, the practiced voice. He found Cole sitting on the curb beside the janitor and stopped a few feet away. This is a staff parking area, Marsh said. Are you on shift? Cole didn't get up. No. Then you have no business here. And neither does he after Friday. Marsh looked at his watch. I've already filed the paperwork. There's nothing to discuss. I have authority over this entire facility's operations, and I'd suggest you remember that before you decide to make this difficult. Cole still didn't get up. He just tilted his head slightly the way a man does when he hears a sound from far off. Because there was a sound far down the county road, low at first, the kind of sound that comes up to the ground before it reaches the ears. A rumble, the kind that comes from many engines moving in formation. What's that? Marsh said. Cole finally smiled. It was a quiet one, and it was the most frightening thing in that parking lot. That's the rest of the conversation. Marsh turned toward the road. He didn't understand yet. Then the first headlights came over the rise, and then more behind them, and then more, until the gray dawn down the county road was a moving river of light. The engines arrived before the bikes did. The sound rolled across the empty cornfields and hit the glass doors of the hospital and made the windows tremble in their frames. Then they came over the hill in a long, disciplined line, 2 by 2, chrome catching the first light of the sun, leather dark against the gray sky. They did not race. They did not roar through. They came in slow and ordered, the way men come when someone has called and the answer is not in question. 307 motorcycles filled the staff lot of St. Bridget Medical Center in under 4 minutes. They parked in rows, and then, one by one, the engines died. And then there was silence. The silence of 300 riders standing in a parking lot at dawn is a thing that cannot be described as someone who has not stood inside it. It is heavier than any noise. Del Marsh stood in the middle of it with his clipboard against his chest, and he had gone the color of the asphalt. The nurses had come out the side door, all of them now, the whole night shift, standing with their hands over their mouths. The riders did not look at Marsh, not one of them. They looked at the old man on the curb. One man walked forward from the front of the line. He was older than Cole, gray all the way through his beard, with a road captain's rocker on his vest and a slow, heavy walk. He came across the lot, and he did not so much as glance at the suit standing in his path. He stepped around him as if he were a cone in a parking lot. He stopped in front of Walter, who had risen unsteadily to his feet, and he looked at the old man for a long moment. "You Walter?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Walter whispered. "My name's Briggs. I've been writing 40 years. The big man's voice was rough and quiet. "We heard you've been taking care of one of ours every morning since last winter, and we heard nobody ever once took care of you." He looked at the old man's pressed gray shirt, buttoned all the way up, and at the rag still folded in his back pocket, and something in his weathered face came loose. "That ends today." Behind him, 300 men stood without a sound. Briggs turned finally and looked at Marsh. He looked at him the way you look at a thing you have decided not to step on only because it isn't worth the trouble. "You the one cutting him loose Friday?" Marsh's mouth opened. The polished voice came out thinner than he wanted it to. "There are procedures. Ownership. I don't think you understand the structure of—" "I understand it fine," Briggs said. "Half the men in this lot work in this county. Some of them sit on boards. One of them owns the building 2 doors down from your parent company's regional office, and every one of us is going to know your name by tonight." He let that sit. "Or you tear up that paperwork, you keep this man on with his pension intact, and you get in your car, and we never have to think about you again. Your choice. We've got all morning." Marsh looked at 300 faces. He did his math. He lost. He didn't say anything. He turned, and he walked to the charcoal sedan with the clipboard man hurrying behind him. And he got in, and he drove out of the lot through a sea of motorcycles that did not move an inch to make room for him. He had to crawl the car around them. He did not deserve a faster exit, and he did not get one. Then he was gone down the county road, and nobody watched him go. Walter stood in the middle of 300 men, and he did not know what to do with his hands. The paperwork was torn up that same morning. The hospital's board met by noon, and by the end of the week, Walter Pruitt's position was not only reinstated but made permanent. With his full pension restored under a clause the new ownership suddenly found very easy to honor. Del Marsh was reassigned out of state inside a month, after a number of people in the county made a number of quiet phone calls. Walter went back to work the next morning, the same as always. He rose at 4. He made 1 cup of coffee. He drove the empty roads. But when he reached the staff lot before dawn, the black Harley was already gleaming. Cole had cleaned it himself and left the polish can on the seat with a folded rag and a card written in the careful block letters of a man who had learned cursive late. It said only, "Your turn to let somebody do it for you." Walter stood there in the cold for a long time. Then he picked up the rag anyway, and he cleaned a spot near the headlight that didn't need cleaning, because some habits are how a man says the things he can't say out loud. Cole came out a few minutes later and found him there. He didn't tell him to stop. He just sat down on the curb beside the old man the way he had before, and the two of them watched the sun come up over the cornfields while 300 miles of road waited the way it always does for the men who belong to it. Some people think strength is the ability to close a line item and walk away. They are wrong. Real strength is quieter than that. Sometimes it is an old man with stiff hands polishing a stranger's motorcycle in the dark for 11 months and never once asking to be thanked. If this story reached you, if you believe that the quiet good people are the ones who hold the whole world together, hit that like and share it with someone who needs to remember that nobody is ever truly alone. Subscribe so you never miss the next one. And tell me in the comments, who is the Walter in your life? The one who does the quiet thing and never asks for credit. I read every single one.